Billionaire CEO left his pregnant fiancée. 3 years later, he sees her at a charity event and is shocked. There's a moment when your whole world collapses, and all you can do is breathe. For Emma Thompson, that moment came with 2 pink lines and a slammed door. He left her pregnant, alone. 3 years later, he saw her again, on a stage, accepting an award, with his son holding her hand. The door that closed and the one she opened. The soft chime of the pregnancy test echoed through the silence of the penthouse kitchen. Emma Thompson stood frozen, her fingers trembling around the small white plastic. 2 pink lines. Positive. Her heart raced. She had rehearsed this moment, envisioned his smile, the way he would lift her off the floor in one of those cinematic spins. But instead, James Crawford stood on the opposite side of the marble counter, unmoved. He wasn't looking at her. He was loosening his tie. His voice was low, flat. The company's expanding. We're moving to Singapore next month. Emma blinked, not understanding. We'll move together then. James, there is no we in this decision. The board's already approved the merger. I'm marrying Helen Chen next month. The words knocked the breath out of her lungs. Helen Chen, his investor's daughter. How long, James? She whispered. He wouldn't answer. It's business. I'm carrying your child. And you're giving me a business plan? Her voice cracked. He picked up his briefcase. Mechanical. Detached. A man already gone. You'll be taken care of. The penthouse is yours. My lawyers. Your lawyers? Emma stepped forward. Look me in the eyes and tell me the last 3 years meant nothing. He finally did, and what she saw chilled her to the bone. There was nothing left. No love, no regret. Just emptiness. I'm sorry, he said. And now he left. Just like that. The test beeped again. Positive. The sound mocked her. Her phone buzzed. Sarah Chen, her best friend and fellow resident. And how did he take the news? Crawford Technologies announces merger with Chen Global. CEO James Crawford to wed Helen Chen in Singapore. Emma barely made it to the bathroom before the nausea hit. It wasn't just the morning sickness. It was betrayal, heartbreak, and the brutal sting of rejection. Her pager buzzed. Emergency surgery. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her white coat wrinkled, her eyes rimmed with tears, but she straightened her back, tied her hair, and whispered to herself, "You are Dr. Emma Thompson. You are more than what he left behind." He grabbed her keys and the pregnancy. He had 9 months to figure out how to be a single mother. But right now, he had a life to save. By sunrise, her hands were still steady, her mind sharp, her heart breaking. James had drained the accounts. Every joint saving, checking, even her personal one. The penthouse keys didn't work. He had done more than walk away. He'd erased her from his life entirely. But he hadn't erased her purpose. Sarah found her outside the hospital's ATM, face pale, eyes dark with exhaustion. "You look like hell." Emma gave a tired laugh. "Morning sickness makes this coffee taste like battery acid. You're staying with me. No arguments." And just like that, a new life began. Not one she'd planned, but one she would build with her own hands. He performed surgery while hiding morning sickness. She filed legal papers between consultations, and when James's mother, Margaret Crawford, called over and over again, Emma declined them all. But Margaret kept trying, kept pucks. "Please, let me help. This isn't what I wanted for you or my grandchild." Emma blocked her number. She didn't need apologies. She needed strength, and she was building it. One surgery at a time. One missed heartbeat followed by another saved. Her baby growing inside her, a heartbeat she could never walk away from. Months passed. He read financial books between shifts. She opened a new account. Her friend's cousin, a fierce lawyer, guided her through every trick James tried to pull. Emma stayed silent, refused hush money, built quiet leverage. 3 more years, she told Sarah, and I'll own enough shares to matter. Sarah raised an eyebrow. He'll never see it coming. Emma smiled. No. 3 years later, Dr. Emma Thompson walked a red carpet in an emerald gown, her son Lucas's small hand clutched in hers. It was the perfect mix of both of them. James's sharp mind, her steel. At the Henderson Children's Gala, she stood tall. Her hands once trembled over a pregnancy test. Now they held international surgical patents. And tonight, he was receiving the Medical Innovation Award. The ballroom applauded. Photographers captured every angle. But all Emma saw was a figure near the bar. James Crawford. Older, haggard, his eyes locked on hers. She turned to Lucas. "Remember what we practiced? I hand you the doctor prize and say congratulations." Emma kissed his forehead. And as they walked to the stage, mother and son, confident and whole, James Crawford finally saw everything he had walked away from. Not just a woman. Not just a child. But a legacy he would never reclaim. And the night was just beginning. Section 1, the merger. Over love, the price of walking away. Cinematic, emotional, a betrayal that shatters two futures before one of them learns to rebuild. Seattle's skyline shimmered behind the penthouse windows, the city unaware that two hearts inside were quietly breaking. James Crawford stood with his back to Emma, staring out at the view like it could somehow justify what he was about to do. His tailored navy suit, hand-stitched Italian leather shoes, the Rolex ticking at his wrist, all signs of a man used to control, power, precision. But tonight he was neither. Emma's voice trembled behind him. Preg. She stood there in her blue hospital scrubs, still warm from a 14-hour shift at Harborview Medical. Her hair was pulled back, dark tendrils escaping at her temples, exhaustion etched across her face. And yet, she was glowing, hopeful, vulnerable. Don't turn round. "You should sit down," he said. Emma's brows furrowed. What? Because he had moving to Singapore. "The board approved the merger. It's done." Emma blinked. Then we go together. You promised we'd always..." He cut her off, finally facing her. "Marrying Helen Chen." The word time seemed to stop. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the antique wall clock. The world still turned, but hers had just shattered. "Helen, your investor's daughter," Emma whispered. "It's not personal, it's strategy. Crawford Technologies needs this merger. She's the bridge." Emma backed away slightly, her voice thin. "You're talking about leverage. I'm talking about our baby." He walked past her, grabbing his briefcase with clinical detachment. "You'll be provided for. The patent house is yours. My lawyer..." "Your lawyers?" she snapped, voice sharp as glass. "This isn't a divorce, this is abandonment." "A transition," James replied coldly. Emma stepped closer, her hand trembling but her eyes blazing. "Look me in the eye and tell me the last 3 years meant nothing." He hesitated, and then, slowly, he looked. And that was worse than any answer. Because in his eyes there was nothing. No guilt, no love, just, "I'm sorry," he said. "No, you're not." Her voice cracked. "You're just done." He didn't argue, he turned the doorknob. "Don't try to contact me," he added. "The accounts will be transferred by morning." And then he was gone. The soft click of the closing door sounded like a death sentence. Emma stood frozen, a breath, a heartbeat, then another. And then she broke. She curled into the corner of the kitchen, the marble tiles cold against her cheek. Her hands moved to her stomach, gently cradling the life inside. Not even a bump yet, but already more real to her than James had ever been. The pregnancy test still blinked silently on the counter. Pink. New futures changed. 3 hours later, her pager buzzed. Emma squashed water on her face, tied her coat, stepped into the elevator. And just like that, good Emma Thompson was back on duty. But this time with fire in her chest and a vow in her heart. "He may have taken everything, but he will never take me." The next day brought more blows. "Your card was denied at the ATM. Joint savings drained. Personal account zeroed out. The penthouse? Luck. He'd spent the night on a cot in the hospital's on-call room, clutching her stomach as her body rebelled with both fatigue and nausea. Her best friend, Dr. Sarah Chen, found her outside the ATM, shoulders sagging, still in scrubs. He cleaned out everything, Emma muttered, sipping bad coffee. Sarah's eyes flared. That's illegal. Doesn't matter. His name's on everything. Where did you sleep? Call rail. Between surgery. Emma gave her a tired smile. And my patients don't care. They still need saving. Sarah looped her arm through Emma's. You're coming home with me. Days became weeks. Emma worked impossible hours. Morning sickness, swelling ankles, court documents, NDA threats. All of it fought like another surgery. He was still performing miracles in the OR, while her personal life bled out in silence. Jum's mother, Margaret, kept calling. Please, this isn't what I wanted, let me help. Emma deleted the messages. He had no time for regret, only forward. And forward she went. Research grants, innovation proposals. Emma refused hush money. Refused to disappear. Instead, she put in quietly, methodically. Using shell companies and gifted legal structures, she began purchasing minor shares in Crawford Technologies through third parties. A few thousand here, a few more there. Sarah noticed. What are you in? And he had building leverage. Emma's hand rested over her growing belly. For him, for our son. The day Lucas was born, Emma was performing surgery. A 6-year-old's heart was failing, no time to spare. And contractions started in the middle of the operation. She didn't play. Not leaving until this child's heart is beating on its own, she told the team. And it did. The moment it stabilized, Emma collapsed. Lucas James Thompson entered the world screaming, with lungs strong and a grip that wrapped around his finger like he'd never let go. He stared at him, tears spilling down his cheeks. You look like him, she whispered. But thank God you have my heart. In Singapore, James and Helen Chen smiled for glossy wedding photos. In Seattle, Emma held her baby in her arms, alone, exhausted and victorious. She didn't know it yet. But she had just begun building an empire of her own. One made of glass and steel. But a funnier, of love that doesn't walk a walk. To the rise of Dr. Thompson, building a for you one heart at a time. Single mother, surgeon, strategist, Emma doesn't just survive, she rises. When the world begins to take notice. 3 months after Lucas's birth, the world still knew Emma Thompson as a resident at Harborview Medical Center. But within those sterile hospital walls, she was quietly becoming something much more. Emma's days began before dawn, baby monitor in one hand, surgical notes in the other. Lucas slept tucked safely in the crib beside his twin bed in Sarah's spare room, a sanctuary filled with textbooks, whiteboards, and the soft hum of determination. She had no nanny, no family support, no what. But she had purpose. And fire. Each morning she dropped Lucas at the hospital daycare. The nurses adored him. He was calm, curious, and unnervingly observant, just like his mother. By 7 a.m. Emma was scrubbed in. A blur of surgeries, consults, and academic papers followed. She was now leading a research proposal on minimally invasive pediatric cardiac procedures, a project born during midnight pumping sessions and sleepless feeds. When the funding was approved, Sarah found her in the break room, staring at the letter with trembling hands. Full funding, Emma whispered. They approved it. Sarah grinned. While James played golf in Singapore, you just got a green light to revolutionize pediatric surgery. Emma smiled, her eyes misting. We were going to help so many kids. Lucas grew, so did the legend of Dr. Thompson. She was relentless, brilliant, gentle with her patients, fierce in the boardroom. Her proposals began gaining national attention. Her technique, an innovative adaptation of catheter-based procedures, reduced recovery time by half. Her success rate, unmatched. hospital administrator took notice. So did major donors. So did Margaret Crawford. Despite Emma blocking her calls, Margaret never stopped reaching out. When her messages were ignored, she switched to care packages, books for Lucas, tiny suits, classic toys, educational games, all addressed simply, "To my grandson." Emma never responded. But she never sent them back either. Back at the Crawford estate in Singapore, James was gracing magazine covers with Helen Chen on his arm. The merger had skyrocketed Crawford Technologies into global headlines. But what no one saw was the strain behind the scenes. The stock was strong, but the marriage was not. James buried himself in data, IPOs and cold strategy. He avoided the nursery Helen had decorated. He never asked about Emma, never mentioned the son he walked away from. And yet, ever so often when the lights dimmed and the cameras laughed, Emma Thompson, her medical journal entered. Her rising influence. And it gnawed at him. Emma, however, didn't have time to wonder what James was thinking. She was too busy living. At night, after Lucas drifted to sleep against her chest, she opened her laptop and studied her growing investments. Her lawyer, Michael, helped her track every share. She never bought directly, always through proxies, always discreet. By Lucas's second birthday, Emma owned a quiet 4% stake in Crawford Technologies. 3 more years, she told Sarah. And then, Emma's voice was calm, cold. Then I make sure he knows exactly what he threw away. On Lucas's 3rd birthday, a small hospital staff party was held in the cafeteria. Lucas beamed in his miniature lab coat, reciting facts about heart valves and cardiac chambers to amused nurses. Emma watched from across the room, heart full, until her phone buzzed. Crawford Technologies stock plummets amid divorce rumors. Sarah appeared beside her with a slice of cake. He is unraveled. Good, big, good, Emma said quietly. You gonna be on that board one day, Sarah predicted. Emma shook her head. Fiona, I want a seat at his table. Want to rebuild the whole damn table and make sure Lucas owns it. The turning point came at the Henderson Children's Hospital Gala. Emma was being honored for her groundbreaking work. Lucas, now 3, wore a tiny tuxedo and walked the red carpet with her, his hand in hers, confident and calm. Cameras flashed. The MC spoke. Tonight we honor Dr. Emma Thompson, whose new surgical approach has saved over 200 children in the past year alone. As Emma stepped onto the stage, a hush fell. James Crawford stood at the bar, pale, older, unannounced. The donors hadn't expected him, neither had Emma. But there he was, watching. And then Lucas stepped forward, holding the crystal award in both hands. Congratulations, Dr. Mock, he said into the mic. The crowd laughed, then applauded. The ovation was thunderous. James's face was a portrait of quiet devastation. Emma, he looked at Lucas. 3 years ago I learned something about tiny hearts, she said. They're more resilient than we ever imagine, and sometimes they teach us how to heal. The skip became the stuff of legend. The photo of Emma holding her son and her award went viral across the medical community. That night, Crawford Technologies board members began asking new questions. The next morning, Emma's inbox lit up with an unexpected message. Helen Chen. Subject line, let's talk. Your shares, your son. Emma stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Michael. Tell me exactly how many shares I control, combined with Margaret's last gift. 80%, he said. The largest single. Emma nodded slowly. Schedule a trip to Singapore. Back in Seattle, Lucas sat on Sarah's lap reading a physics book. Margaret Crawford was dying of pancreatic cancer. James was about to lose his company. And Helen Chen? Helen wanted an ally. He wanted Chinois. But Emma didn't care about boardroom wars. She cared about one thing. Lucas. A future where her son never questioned his worth. Session 3. The Charita Gala. when a father sees what he abandoned. Some reckonings don't come with rage, but with applause. A spotlight and the echo of a child's voice calling Dr. Ma. The ballroom shimmered in soft candlelight, flooded with silk gowns, crystal chandeliers, and Seattle's most powerful names. The Henderson Children's Hospital annual gala had always been a prestigious affair, but this year it carried special weight. Tonight, Dr. Emma Thompson, single mother, surgical pioneer, and the woman once left behind, was receiving the Medical Innovation Award for her groundbreaking work in pediatric heart surgery. Emma stood just off stage, adjusting the emerald green satin of her gown. Every inch of her looked composed, regal. Her hair swept back, her heels high, her voice rehearsed. But her heart was a thunderstorm. Not because of the award, but because of the man she had just seen across the room. James Crawford. Older now, haggard, his once polished veneer cracked by scandal, divorce, and the slow public collapse of Crawford Technologies. He hadn't approached. He hadn't needed to. Because when his eyes met Emma's across the ballroom, the past came roaring back. Lucas tugged her hand. "Is it time, Mummy?" Emma knelt to his level, touching his small bow tie. "Do you remember what we practiced?" Lucas nodded seriously. "I give you the doctor prize and say congratulations." He kissed his forehead. "You're going to do amazing. So were you, Hadat." Her eyes. Because this night was about more than awards. It was about truth, legacy, visibility. It was about no longer hiding what had once been dismissed as inconvenient. Let the world see the child James left behind. Let him feel it. The MC's voice boomed from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to present the Medical Innovation Award to a surgeon whose technique is rewriting the future of pediatric care." Applause erupted. And from the corner of the ballroom, James Crawford turned fully to face the stage, just in time to see his son walk into the spotlight. 3 years old. Tuxedo tailored to his tiny frame, and holding a gleaming crystal plaque in his hands. Emma took the stage gracefully, Lucas matching her step for step. The lights caught them perfectly. Mother Quignard, the doctor, and her legacy. James didn't breathe. 3 years ago, Emma began, voice strong and even. "I learned something profound, not from a textbook, not from a mentor, but from a patient so small I could hold their heart in the palm of my hand." He paused. The audience leaned in. "They taught me that tiny hearts, especially broken ones, are capable of extraordinary healing, and sometimes they end up teaching us more about strength than we ever imagined." He looked down at Lucas, who beamed up at her. "So to every parent who has trusted me with their child's heart, thank you. But the biggest thank you goes to my son Lucas, who reminds me every day that the strongest hearts aren't always the ones we operate on." Lucas stepped forward, holding up the plaque. "Congratulations, Dr. Mahdi," he said into the microphone, voice clear, confident. The ballroom erupted. Laughter, applause, a standing ovation. Flashbulb. Emma knelt beside Lucas, hugging him close as the cameras flashed. "And James?" He hadn't moved. He couldn't. His son was right there. His own blood. His legacy. And yet he had no place on that stage. Later at the gala dinner, Emma sat at a table flanked by hospital board members. Lucas munched quietly on breadsticks, chatting with a nurse about different types of heart valves. Sarah leaned in. He'd gone. Emma didn't need to ask who. "Left right out your speech." Emma nodded, sipping her water. "Good." Sarah hesitated. He looked. Emma set her glass down carefully. "He should be." James exited through the side entrance, the cold night air slapping his face. He leaned against a pillow, breathing hard. In all his calculations, his mergers, his PR teams, his carefully scripted redemption plans, nothing had prepared him for that child. Lucas saw with his chin, Emma's eyes, and a voice that struck like lightning. He remembered the night Emma had told him she was pregnant, the way her hands had trembled, the pain in her voice. And he'd walked away for a deal. Now he stood alone, stripped of his marriage, his wealth, his company unraveling under federal investigation. And the only legacy he had left, he'd just called someone else Mommy. Back inside, Lucas tugged Emma's sleeve. "Can we go see the fish tank again?" Emma smiled, smoothing his hair. "Of course." A nurse approached. "Dr. Thompson, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's an emergency case in the pediatric wing." Emma stood instantly, adjusting her gown. "Let's go." Sarah swooped in. "I'll take Lucas." Lucas wrapped his arms around Emma's waist. "Save the tiny heart, Mommy."
Emma bent down and kissed his forehead. Always. And then she was gone. That night, another heart was saved. Another child lived because Emma had chosen medicine over bitterness, healing over revenge. James? He sat alone in a hotel room, replaying the image of his son on that stage.
Section 4, Helen Chen's offer. The power play no one saw coming. Just when Emma thinks her world is finally under her control, a new alliance proposition shatters the chessboard and puts the queen in motion. The news came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Lucas was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, carefully fitting together pieces of a miniature 3D heart valve model, his tiny brows furrowed in concentration. Across the room, Emma reviewed lab results for an upcoming presentation, sipping lukewarm tea. And then her phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. Helen Chen Crawford. He stared at it. The woman James left her for. The woman whose family money had launched Crawford Technologies into the global elite. Emma let it ring out. Then it rang again. And again. The fifth call came with a message. "We need to talk. Immediately. It's about your shares. And your son." Emma's brace caught. "Share? Lucas?" Her stomach twisted. "Sarah," she called, stepping into the hallway. Her best friend emerged from the kitchen holding a juice box. "What?" "Enough." Sarah didn't need to ask who she was. "Helen." Emma nodded, voice tight. "About the shares, about Lucas." Sarah's eyes sharpened instantly. What exactly did she say? "He wants to talk." Emma's voice dropped. "Said it's about the board. And my son." That afternoon, Emma sat across from her lawyer Michael in his office. The blinds were drawn. Lucas stayed with Sarah. Michael looked up from his laptop. "She's not bluffing. Helen knows you and Margaret quietly transferred shares through proxies. You now hold 18% voting power, the largest single bloc." Emma stared out the window. Was he making a move on James? Michael nodded. "Board's fractured. His marriage is dead. His stock's falling. If Helen secures your vote, she'll force him out." Emma's jaw clenched. "This was never about power," she said. "It was about protecting Lucas, making sure James never had the right to decide who mattered again." Michael leaned forward. "And now you do have power. What are you going to do with it?" Helen Chen arrived in Seattle 2 days later. The meeting was set at a private suite at the Four Seasons. Emma wore her white coat directly from the OR, hair tied back, no makeup, deliberately unpolished. Helen was immaculate. Dark navy pantsuit, silk blouse, diamond earrings that caught the light like a warning. "You look very maternal," Helen said coolly. Emma didn't smile. "And you look like someone who just realized her empire has termites." Helen's mouth twitched. "Let's skip the posturing," she said, gesturing to the table. "You're smart. I'm smart. James is no longer useful." Emma sat. "May I?" "Not for long," Helen replied, pouring herself tea. "The divorce papers were filed. What I want now is simple. Control." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You want to take his company?" Helen didn't flinch. "I want to take back what I helped build. You, Emma, hold the swing vote. Your son owns Margaret's shares. You hold your own. That's 18%. It tips the scale. And if I say no?" Helen's eyes narrowed. "You won't, because unlike James, you understand legacy, and you understand what kind of world your son will inherit." Emma stayed silent. Helen leaned in. Help me remove him. Vote for the restructuring proposal, and I'll make sure Lucas's future is secured. Not just financially, permanently. Access, resources, protection. Emma's fingers curled around her teacup. And if I don't help out? Helen's smile was ice. In filing for full control, the board will back me eventually. You'll lose your leverage. And when that happens, Emma stood. I don't negotiate under threats. Helen rose, her tone clipped but calm. Negotiate under opportunity. He placed a file on the table. It read, Lucas Thompson Crawford Technologies Legacy Partnership Proposal. Emma didn't pick it up. Crashita to the door. Goodbye, Mrs. Crawford. Do come back to the hospital. You'll call me when you're ready. Emma left without looking back. That night, Emma returned home to find Lucas asleep on the couch, Sarah brushing his hair back gently. He asked about his dad today, Sarah said quietly, saw James's photo on a magazine at the grocery store. Emma's heart thudded. What did you say? I told him his dad's a complicated man, but his mom's the reason he's safe and strong and loved. Emma sat beside Lucas watching his small chest rise and fall. I met with Helen. Sarah tensed. He wants me to vote James out of his company. Sarah blinked. Are you going to? Emma didn't answer right away. Then, the board meeting was scheduled for a Monday. Emma flew out Sunday night. Lucas stayed with Sarah. As the plane climbed into the night sky, Emma stared out the window, Margaret's last words echoing in her mind. Sometimes revenge and justice look remarkably similar. The Singapore boardroom was glass-walled, sleek, corporate cold. James sat at the far end of the table, his face paler than she remembered. His eyes widened slightly when Emma entered, but he said nothing. Helen sat in the center, poised like a chess queen mid-checkmate. Emma stood before the board. Before I begin, I want to introduce someone. She connected her laptop to the projector. The screen flickered to life. A video played. Lucas, seated at a study desk, solving equations, with Margaret beside him, giggling. The board murmured. This, Emma said calmly, is Lucas Thompson. IQ tested at 164. My son. She looked directly at Ukuchenda. Oh, son. Gasps filled the room. James's hands gripped the table. Emma turned back to the board. And vote my shares, and my son's shares, in favor of Helen Chen's proposal. A beep of stunned silence. Then chaos. James stood. Emma, please. She didn't look at him. My lawyer will handle everything. I have a flight to catch. And then she walked out, heels echoing on the marble like thunder. An hour later, somewhere over the Pacific, Emma received a text from Sarah. Margaret's gone. Piscalicus was with her. Tears filled Emma's. She opened her carry-on. Inside was a letter from Margaret. And a U.S. Emma read it slow. By the time the plane touched down in Seattle, James hadn't just abandoned her. He had committed corporate fraud to do it. The marriage license with Helen, backdated. The merge, manipulated. The money, moved through shell accounts months before Emma even announced her pregnancy. Margaret had kept every receipt. Use this wisely, the letter read. Not for revenge, but for Lucas, for protection. Emma closed the letter with trembling fingers. The game had changed. And now she held every card. Section 5. The USB, the funeral and the fall of a CEO. When love dies, what remains is memory. But when truth resurfaces, what falls is empire, and James Crawford is about to lose both. The church was quiet. Muted light streamed through stained glass, casting soft blues and crimson across the pews. Margaret Crawford's funeral was small. By request. No media, no corporate banners, just family, friends, and a scattering of hospital staff who knew her not as the matriarch of a tech empire, but as the quiet donor who believed in heart. Emma stood at the entrance, Lucas gripping her hand, his black suit too big in the shoulders, his eyes too wise for his age. They had arrived late on purpose. James was already there, seated in the farthest pew from the casket, hunched and grayed, alone. He didn't turn when they walked. Emma kicked chin high. Lucas kept his eyes on the casket. "She always gave me books," he whispered, "and puzzles, and once she mailed me a video about baby hearts." Emma smiled faintly. "That's because she believed in yours." They sat in the back, said their goodbyes silently, and when the ceremony ended they left before the reception. Emma never looked at James, but Lucas did. He waned. Then July she shocked, but Emma had already turned away. 3 days later, Crawford Technologies filed for bankruptcy protection. The headline exploded. "From empire to ashes, Crawford's downfall begins." CFO implicated in fraud allegations, tied to early merger manipulation. The former CEO, James Crawford, under investigation. Emma sipped coffee in her office, Lucas coloring in a corner with a set of Margaret's old oil pencils. Sarah stormed in holding a newspaper. "He is being audited. The board is freezing his assets." Emma didn't flinch. "Good." Sarah dropped a second envelope on her desk. "And he dunked skin." Emma looked up sharply. "What?" "James, in the lobby. He has something for you. Says it's from Margaret." Emma sighed, standing. 5 minutes. He found him by the fish tank in the children's wing, Lucas's favorite spot. He looked wrecked. A wrinkled designer suit. Eyes hollowed out like a man who hadn't. When he saw her, he stood. "Thinking. I'm here because of Margaret," Emma said flatly. He nodded, producing a thick envelope. "She left this for Lucas." Emma took it, fingers brushing his briefly. "Is that all?" He hesitated, then held up a second envelope. "A letter. For him, from me, when he's older." Emma took it too, reluctantly. His voice broke. "Emma, I know I don't deserve to ask, but I'd like to meet him." Emma's stare was ice. "He's not a company you can acquire. He's not a merger you can arrange. He's a child. My child. The one you walked away from." James's voice dropped. She laughed bitterly. "You lost the right to say that when you chose a boardroom over a heartbeat." "It was wrong," he said. Emma's jaw clenched. "You were a cow." Security approached, on cue. He nodded to them, but James raised his hand in surrender. "I'm leaving. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. Everything I missed." Emma's voice softened, only slightly. "He has already surpassed your engineers, at 4. James closed his eyes. "Like fun." "No," she cut in. "Like mother." And with VME she turned. That night, she read both letters. Margaret's was full of love. It included the legal transfer of a trust fund, educational provisions, a list of guardians, and her final words. "Raise him fierce, Emma. Raise him kind. And when the storm hit Crawford Tech, use what I gave you to build something better." James's letter was full of regret. Excuses dressed up as confession. Emma folded it slowly, sealed both envelopes in a new one, and marked it. "Lucas Thompson, open on your 18th birthday." Then she wrote one of her own. It was "My dearest son, your father chose an empire of glass and silicon. I chose you, and it was the easiest decision I've ever made." Mom. The next morning her phone lit up again. Crawford Technologies. Assets seized, James Crawford. Under formal investigation. Emma turned off the screen. Lucas came running in with a book about heart murmurs. "Mummy, want to do pages 42 to 60 today?" Emma smiled, pulling him into her lap. "Of course. Let's save some tiny hearts." Section 6. Lucas the Prodigy. A future he can't touch. The son he abandoned isn't just surviving, he's leading. And now, from the outside, James watches a legacy rise, one that will never carry his name. Seattle. 3 years later. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Henderson Pediatric Innovation Wing, now bearing a new name etched in glass and steel: the Margaret Crawford Center for Pediatric Innovation. Inside, a 9-year-old boy stood at a podium almost too tall for him, but he didn't flinch. He was dressed in a white lab coat, a stethoscope toy draped proudly around his neck. His name tag read, "You look at James Crawford, youngest certified medical researcher in U.S. history." Emma stood just a few steps behind, one hand over her heart, the other steadying her breath. This was no ordinary ceremony. This was the unveiling of her son's revolutionary pediatric heart valve prototype, a design he had drafted at age 7, refined at 8, and now at 9 prepared for clinical trial collaboration with Johns Hopkins. The room was full of top cardiac surgeons, biotech investors, and global press. But for Lucas, it was just another day of showing what tiny hearts and brilliant ones could do. He cleared his throat and launched into a seamless explanation of adaptive valve rhythms and flexible biopolymer structures. Emma watched the stunned expressions ripple across the crowd. They weren't patronizing him. They were learning from him. She had once feared Lucas would grow up haunted by the absence of a father. He was growing up in rooms where men twice his age struggled to keep up. In the very back of that crowded room stood a man in a gray jacket. Not invited, not acknowledged. James Crawford. His hair was streaked with silver now. His clothes hung looser, like his body had shrunk from the weight of guilt. There were no cameras trailing him anymore, no press waiting for his soundbite. Watching a boy he'd never held, listening to a voice that sounded eerily familiar, seeing the face he once turned away from. Later, outside the press circle, Lucas pulled Emma aside excitedly. "Dr. Maya, did you see their faces when I explained the mitral valve response?" Emma laughed. "You were brilliant, sweetheart." He leaned closer, whispering, "Can we start trials today?" Emma smiled but knelt to his level. "We have to finish FDA prep, but soon." Lucas nodded, satisfied, then paused. There was a man in the back, watching. He looked sad. Emma's stomach tensed. What did he look like? Like older me, but tired. Emma glanced over her shoulder, but James was already gone. That night, Emma tucked Lucas in. The same lamp Margaret had gifted him still glowed softly by his bed. Books on congenital defects and global surgical case studies surrounded him like stuffed animals. "Mummy. Did you ever want me to meet him? My dad." Emma paused, then sat at the edge of his bed. "Sometimes," she said gently, "when I thought maybe he'd change. Maybe he'd show up." Why didn't he?" Emma's throat tightened. "Because he made a mistake, baby. A really big one. And by the time he realized it, you were already too extraordinary for him to catch up." Lucas was quiet. "So I don't have a dad." Emma stroked his hair. "You have me, and Sarah, and a whole hospital family that cheers for you louder than any stadium." He nodded slowly. "Okay. And when you're older," Emma added softly, "there are letters. From me, from him, from Margaret. You can read them when you decide you're ready." Lucas yawned and turned over. "Okay, but I already know who I am." Emma blinked back tears. "Who's that?" "A kid who fixes tiny hearts." Meanwhile, across the city, James sat in a rented apartment, alone. The letter he wrote for Lucas, the one he left with Emma years ago, remained unopened. His company was gone, his assets seized. Helen had taken the board, the press had taken his image, and now the boy on every news headline, the one solving equations and designing implants, wasn't just a child genius. He was Jabez's son. But not his legacy. That had been claimed by Emma. And rightly so. A week later, the International Pediatric Cardiology Conference in Zurich. They wanted both Emma and Lucas to present. "This is it," Sarah said. "The world stage." Emma smiled, but her gaze flicked toward the window. "It's not about fame anymore. And what is it? It's about showing Lucas that the name someone gives you doesn't define you. The choices you make do." Sarah grinned. Then pack your bags, Dr. Ma. In the months that followed, Lucas became a symbol of hope. Medical journals called him a miracle mind. Emma was named Physician of the Year for her technique became standard curriculum at Harvard and Johns Hopkins. James watched from afar. Photos, newsfeeds, social media. Every image like a slow, permanent erosion of what he once believed power looked like. It wasn't in corner Anna. It was in Lucas's hand. Hands he'd never held. Section 7, Zurich. Letters. And the day the truth was open. At the edge of the world stage, Lucas shines brighter than ever. But when the letters are finally opened, the truth walks in, wearing both sorrow and legacy. The soft hum of jet engine fitted into the crisp Zurich air as Emma and Lucas stepped off the private charter organized by the International Pediatric Cardiology Conference. Snowflakes danced like confetti around them, glinting in the morning sun. Lucas wore his white coat like armor, pulling his small-wheeled suitcase with a stethoscope embroidered on the side. Emma held his free hand tightly, their steps perfectly in sync. Behind him, Sarah followed, wheeling a second bag. "Zurich is freezing," she muttered. "Even the air smells expensive." Emma smiled faintly, but her mind was already racing. Conference agenda, media interviews, Lucas's keynote. Felicocus. The letters. They'd traveled across oceans, sealed in a leather folio, nestled in her carry-on. Margaret's farewell. Judith's confession. Her own letter, marked for Lucas's 18th birthday. But Lucas was no ordinary child. And that birthday would come soon enough. That afternoon they arrived at the Grand Hotel, a regular stone fortress on the Rhine, its chandeliers older than most countries. The conference had reserved the entire top floor for Emma and Lucas. Inside their suite, Lucas wandered toward the bay window, watching the swans glide across the river. "Mommy, I know about the letters." Emma stilled, a hairbrush in hand. "What letters?" "The ones you keep in the leather folder. I saw them last month, but I didn't open them." Emma sat down beside him. "He didn't." Lucas shrugged, tracing the gloss with his finger. "Because I knew you'd give them to me when it mattered." Emma exhaled. "And now?" He looked at her with those old soul eyes. "I think it matters now." That night, Emma laid the letters out on the coffee table. Margaret's, James's, her own. The fire crackled softly in the corner. Sarah sat quietly, sipping wine, giving them space. Lucas picked up Margaret's letter first. He read it slowly, silently. He unpulled it carefully and held it to his chest. "She loved me," he whispered. "So much," Emma said, stroking his hair. Next, James's letter. Lucas read it with furrowed brows, eyes scanning every word. When he finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. He said he was scared. Lucas finally murmured that he thought love would ruin the company. Emma closed her eyes. He was ready. "I know." Lucas placed the letter down like it was made of glass. "Can I read yours?" laughed. Emma handed it to him. His fingers were steady. He read silently, lips moving as he traced each line. Then, without a word, he stood and climbed into her lap. He wrapped his arms around her and rested his forehead to hers. "Thank you for choosing me." Emma held him close, her tears hot and quiet. Always. The next morning, Zurich's largest lecture hall buzzed with anticipation. Lucas was set to deliver the closing keynote of the conference, an 11-minute presentation on adaptive valve integration, co-authored by Emma. World-class surgeons, policy leaders, and biotech CEOs filled the rows. But one seat near the back was occupied by a man in a black wool coat and a simple scarf. No press, no cameras, no invitation. James Crawford. He looked older still, hollowed out and human, no longer the titan who once towered above grand cuisine. When Lucas walked onto the stage, the murmurs hushed. He stood on a custom platform to reach the microphone. A simple slide behind him read, "A Tiny Heart's Giant Ideas," presented by Lucas Thompson Crawford, age 9. He began with clarity. And when he clicked to the final slide showing his newest model with the name Crawford Pediatric Valve, a gasp swept the room. Lucas raised his eyes. This valve was named not for a company but for a woman who saw a future where children like me had better chances. For Margaret Crawford, my grandmother, and for every child who's ever been underestimated. Jamie. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Emma was already crying. But James, he said still, because he knew that name, Crook. Later that night, as Emma and Lucas packed for their flight home, the hotel concierge delivered a small envelope. He returned just a message. I saw him speak. I don't deserve him, but thank you for raising someone who will change the world. Emma stared at it for a long moment. He put together the picture, RGQ. As their plane soared over the Atlantic, Lucas leaned against his mother's shoulder. Could I write him back someday? Emma hesitated. If that's what you want. Lucas nodded slowly. Not now, but maybe, when I've saved a few more hearts. In Seattle, James sat in his small apartment, watching Lucas's keynote replayed online. The comments praised the boy's brilliance, the mother's grace. And no one. He closed the laptop,
Folded his hands, and whispered the only words left. Sorry, but no one heard.
Session at Margaret's legacy, the inheritance that wasn't money. Some inherit estates, others inherit purpose. Lucas Thompson inherited a promise, to love, to lead, and to heal, because one woman believed enough for them all. The morning sun cast soft gold through the glass atrium of Henderson Children's Hospital. The new research wing, named in Margaret Crawford's honor, buzzed quietly with measured energy. In the corner, a smaller plaque had been installed beneath the donor wall. In memory of Margaret Lynn Crawford. Philanthropist, grandmother, guardian of tiny hearts. Emma stood in front of it, Lucas by her side, holding a single white lily. It had been exactly 1 year since Margaret passed. 1 year since the day Lucas had watched her slip away, hand in hand with him, while whispering stories about swans, stardust, and second chances. He'd asked Emma afterward, was she proud of me? Emma had answered, more than the sun is proud of the dawn. Today, the hospital was hosting a private dedication ceremony, not just for Margaret's contribution, but to announce the establishment of the Crawford Pediatric Fellowship, an annual research grant designed by Lucas himself to fund surgical innovation in underprivileged hospitals. He'd used part of his trust fund to launch it. No one had told him to. He simply said, "It's what Grandma would have done." The auditorium was filled with hospital staff, families of children Emma had once saved, and fellows eager to apply. Lucas took the stage with practiced ease, his voice now tinged with a maturity that outpaced his years. My grandmother didn't leave me a company. She didn't give me a fortune. She gave me the belief that my ideas mattered, even when I was little. That's what I want this fellowship to be, a place where new ideas are safe to grow, like hearts, like children, like futures. Emma wiped her cheek as the crowd rose to their feet. Sarah squeezed her hand. He's channeling her, word for word. Emma whispered, she lives in his spine. After the ceremony, they walked the hospital gardens, Lucas skipping between stepping stones. Do you think she's watching us? Emma smiled. I think she's with us every time you draw something bold, every time you defend a patient, every time you say something no one your age should even understand. Lucas stopped. She once told me my heart was made of stars. Emma swallowed. Meanwhile, across the city, in a low-lit volunteer clinic in Rainier Valley, James Crawford folded a child's blanket and tucked it into a donation bag. He no longer wore suits, no longer checked stock indexes, no longer corrected people when they didn't recognize his name. His fall from power had been the stuff of headlines, but his quiet reinvention had not. For the last 10 months he had volunteered in children's hospitals across the U.S. and Southeast Asia. No prep, no sketches, just types charts. La Ferco Chaza. He wasn't chasing redemption anymore. It was just showing up. That, he'd learned, was where love started. He wasn't even. A volunteer handed him a manila envelope. Googlefoot Yoga dropped this, said it was private. Inside was a handwritten letter, folded carefully. Lucas's hand up. Dear James, Mom said I could write you when I felt ready. I think I do now. Thank you for the letter you left me. I read it last year in Zurich. I'm not angry anymore. I think you were scared, and I think people who are scared make bad choices. But Grandma wasn't scared. She believed in me before anyone else did. So if you ever wonder why I'm good at hearts, it's because she gave me hers. I don't need a dad right now, but maybe someday we can talk about what you learned. I like hearing stories from people who've made mistakes. They help me be a better doctor. Good luck with your clinics. Lucas. James read it 3 times. Then pressed it to his chest and cried. Not for what was lost, but for what might one day be reclaimed. Weeks later, Emma and Lucas were invited to present at Stanford's Global Health Symposium. On the flight down, Lucas sat cross-legged, sketching a blueprint for a portable neonatal valve. Emma leaned over. You are building bridges everywhere you go. I'm just finishing the one Grandma started, he said. The symposium unveiled a new international collaboration initiative. The keynote speaker, Emma Thompson, stood beside Lucas as she took the stage. The strongest inheritance isn't money, it's belief. One woman believed, a scared pregnant doctor. He believed in a boy with questions too big for his age. And because of her, pediatric care across the world is changing. He turned to Lucas. And that, my son, is a legacy no empire could ever buy. The standing ovation lasted almost 2 minutes. Back in Seattle, the first Crawford Pediatric Fellow arrived, an immigrant med student from Nairobi, hand-picked by Lucas after reviewing 127 applications himself. Her first words? I came here because I read your valve design when I was 17. It gave me hope. You gave me hope. Lucas blushed. I'm just getting started. Emma, watching from the doorway, knew it wasn't pride she felt. It was peace. Section 9. Redemption isn't recognition. The quiet return of James Crawford. He left behind a throne, but when James returns, it's not with a crown. It's with calloused hands, quiet eyes, and a hope that forgiveness doesn't always need applause. The rain came gently that Thursday morning, tapping against the windows of Henderson Children's Hospital, like a quiet rhythm no one could ignore. Lucas was in his research alcove, white coat buttoned, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His fingers danced across a digital tablet displaying new valve flow simulations. He'd been working on a mobile surgical device, something he'd dreamed up after seeing footage from a remote rescue in Guatemala. Across the room, Emma reviewed a grant proposal, but her eyes kept drifting to her son. At 11, Lucas had begun to stretch tall, his jawline sharpening, his voice starting to shift. But inside, he still curled his legs up when he read, and still paused before surgery to whisper, "For the tiny hearts." You know what day it is? Sarah asked, appearing beside Emma with a warm paper cup of chai. Emma blinked. 3 years. Emma looked away. Feels like 10. Sarah nodded, then hesitated. He called. Emma's posture stiffened. He left a message with my assistant. Said he'd be in Seattle this weekend, volunteering at the Rainier Valley Children's Clinic. Emma said nothing. Sarah lowered her voice. He didn't ask to see Lucas. He didn't even ask to see you. Just said to tell you he's still where he said he'd be. 2 days later, Emma pulled into the modest gravel lot of Rainier Valley's clinic. No press, no cameras, no security. Just a hand-painted sign that read, "Healing happens here." He hadn't told Lucas. She wasn't even sure why she'd come. Inside, the clinic buzzed with the quiet tension of overworked nurses and underfunded miracles. Cracked tile, donated monitors, smells of antiseptic and worn-out coffee. We saw him. James on his knees, fixing the wheels of a child's IV stand with a borrowed wrench. He looked up, just briefly. Eyes lined, beard peppered with gray, hands no longer manicured but worn, nicked. He didn't smile. He didn't rise. He nodded once. Emma stood still, memories rushing like tidal water. The marble kitchen counter, the test, the betrayal, the door clicking shut. And now this man who once priced her out of his life, was crouched in a hallway wiping grease from a child's shoe. "You're late," she said softly. James's lips lifted faintly. "The traffic from shame is slow." Emma crossed her arms. "You could have called." "I did years ago. You answered with silence. I figured I'd speak with action instead." She eyed the child beside him, no older than 5, cheeks pale, blanket tucked tightly. "How long have you been doing this?" "Long enough to know I'll never earn redemption, but long enough to understand that wasn't the point." Emma's jaw trembled. "And what is?" James stood slowly. "To show up, even when no one asks, especially when they don't." They stood in silence, not tense, not angry, just weathered. Later, in the break room, James poured 2 coffees. He handed one to her. "You wrote me, you know, after Zurich." Emma nodded. "I know. I kept that letter, read it more times than I deserve." He paused. "He said he didn't need a dad, he needed stories. Mistake. You gave him one hell of a story." James looked down. "Do you think someday he might want to hear the rest?" Emma exhaled. "Maybe, but if you're waiting for a parade, you're in the wrong city." James chuckled softly. "I'm not waiting for anything anymore." Emma took a long sip of coffee, then setting it down. "There's a health fair next week at Henderson. They're low on volunteers for the kids' engineering corner." She didn't look at him when she said it, but she didn't have to. James's voice was thick. "I'll be there." The following Saturday, Lucas stood at the main atrium of Henderson Hospital, guiding a group of elementary kids through a make-your-own-valve activity. Foam tubes, food coloring, plastic funnels. Chaos turned into cardiac logic. Emma stood nearby, arms crossed, watching as the crowd laughed, learned, squealed. And then, James arrived. No badge, no suit, just a name tag that read, Jim Boardroom. He took a corner table and quietly began helping 2 kids build balloon chambers. Lucas didn't notice him at first. But when he did, he froze. They walked over. Emma's breath caught. They didn't shake hands. Oh, they didn't. Lucas simply sat across from him and picked up a funnel. "That's not the right angle," Lucas said, adjusting it. "The blood would pool." James smiled softly. "Thanks, doctor." Lucas nodded once. And they kept building. Together. Later, as the atrium cleared, Emma approached. Lucas was already packing up. James stood. "He's kind." "He is," Emma agreed. "He got that from Margaret." James looked down. "And from you." Emma's eyes shimmered. "I hope you know," she said, "this doesn't mean everything is healed." "No," James replied, "but it means the bleeding stopped." That night, Lucas sat at the kitchen table sketching a new diagram. Sarah was on the couch, reading. Emma joined him. "So what do you think?" Lucas didn't look up. "He listens better now." Emma smiled. "He does. He's not trying to be my dad. That helped. Would you like to see him again?" Lucas nodded once. "Maybe, as long as he brings glue sticks. He forgot them today." Emma laughed. "I'll let him know." Lucas looked up, his eyes so full of quiet knowing. "You're not mad at him anymore, are you?" Emma swallowed. "No, just that. I think that's what forgiveness is," Lucas said, "being tired of hurting." Emma called him. And for the first time in over a decade, her heart felt light. Session 10, the last letter, the white coat, and the day he called her mom. It began with abandonment. It ends with honor. And somewhere between legacy and forgiveness, a boy finds his name and calls the woman who saved him everything he is. It was Lucas's 12th birthday. But there were no clouds, No piñatas, no glittering balloons or circus themes. Instead, he chose a small gathering inside Henderson's surgical conference wing. Not because he wanted to be celebrated, but because he wanted to present to Emma, to Sarah, to the hospital board, to the first-year residents who had once watched him build paper valves, and to a man in the back row, wearing a quiet gray sweater and no expectation at all. James Crawford. Lucas stood at the head of the room, flanked by two monitors, both filled with real-time simulations of his latest project. Project Haven, a portable, low-cost cardiac surgical system for children in war zones. It was brave, but it wasn't what stunned the audience. It was what came after. I know people call me gifted, Lucas began, but what I am is loved. He glanced toward Emma. By a woman who chose me, even when she wasn't chosen, who taught me that leaving doesn't. Emma bit her lip. Sarah reached for a tissue. Lucas turned toward the second monitor. And there was someone who left. My biological father. A man I once thought I'd never forgive. But he came back. Not with answers, just with hands. And time. And quiet. James stared at the floor. I don't know what a perfect family looks like, Lucas said, voice steady. But I know what healing feels like. So today I wanted to say thank you to the people who built me. He stepped off the platform. He walked straight to Emma and handed her a white coat. It had her name embroidered in gold. But beneath it one more line had been stitched, by Lucas himself. Well, Emma's knees buckled as she took it. You already called me that, she whispered. Lucas grinned. But I never gave you the badge. He turned to James. I have one for you too. James's eyes welled. I know. But you showed up. He handed him a smaller patch. Unadorned. It ran. Later that night the family, not just Emma and Lucas anymore, but Sarah, now permanently living in the guest house, and James, who had moved into a studio nearby. Emma made tea. Lucas sat cross-legged, the very last envelope he had waited years to open. The one going up. Lucas, He carefully broke the seal. Emma and James watched as he read silently. And when he was done, Lucas looked up. He wrote, The world will call you a miracle, but I call you mine. Emma reached for his hand. He leaned it. And then, like it had always been waiting to be said, Lucas at Wisconsin. Ma, you were right. Emma blinked. Love isn't who leaves, love is who stays. The next morning, Henderson Hospital unveiled a mural, commissioned in Emma's honor, painted by local artists. It showed three figures.
A surgeon with a child on her back, a boy holding a heart glowing like fire, and behind them, a shadowed figure, planting seeds into cracked ground. Lucas, and yes, even James, because some legacies bloom late, but they still bloom. At a press conference later that week, a reporter asked Luke, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Lucas smiled. "I don't want to be. I already am. I'm someone's son. I'm someone's miracle. And I'm someone who knows what it means to be held together by the people who never gave up on me. But your future, surely it includes medicine." Lucas nodded. It includes healing, whether through valves or letters or forgiveness. Then he looked toward his mother, especially forgiveness. That night, as the stars blinked alive outside his window, Lucas stood between two doors, Emma's study and James's porch. He knocked once on each. Emma opened hers first. Need something? Lucas hugged her. Just wanted you to know, I call you Mom now. Not just in the hospital, everywhere. She froze, then wept into his shoulder. He walked to James next. Older, Lucas said, handing him a schematic for a new lab prototype. James blinked. What's this? Something for you to help build. Because you taught me you don't have to start the story to become part of it. Final scene. Years later, a new facility stood where the old penthouse once towered. Not a luxury high-rise. The clinic. The Lucas Thompson Pediatric Healing Center. Inside, photos lined the hall. Margaret with baby Lucas. Emma in her surgical white. Thing is adjusting a child's eye. Yeah, with coffee and blueprints. One plaque read, "Some empires are built of glass and steel, but the strongest ones, they're built on love. One beating heart at a time."
Concurrent, some empires echo in blood, but the strongest echo in love. The story of Emma Thompson and Lucas wasn't about revenge. It was about repair. It wasn't about who left. It was about who chose to stay, and kept choosing, even when it was hard. 9 years ago, Emma stood alone in the marble kitchen, holding a pregnancy test with trembling hands. She had just been abandoned, stripped of her home, her savings, her trust. But she still had something. A pulse. A child whose heart beat because hers refused to stop. She could have surrendered. She could have hardened. She could have become the kind of person James once chose over her. Instead, she built a future. One patient at a time. One emergency at a time. One night shift. One contraction. One first breath. One miracle at a time. Lucas never grew up needing to be rescued. He grew up watching resilience bloom. He became a healer, not out of genius, but out of gratitude. He was never waiting for a father. He was learning how to become the kind of man worth waiting for. And James? He lost it all. The whitish, the wealth, the brand, the name. But in losing those things he found something else. The courage to return. The humility to listen. And eventually the grace to be welcome, not back to power but back to presence. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't come from the world knowing your name. It comes from a child letting you help glue foam tubes to a paper heart. Love is not who claims you. Love is who stays when no one is watching. Legacy isn't built from empire. It's built from consistency, compassion, and courage. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain. Family is who shows up not just in joy but in recovery. Even broken beginnings can give birth to brilliant futures. If this story touched your heart, if you saw a bit of yourself in Emma, or in Lucas, or even in James, leave a comment below. Tell us what moment broke you and what moment healed you. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Like this video if you believe real love doesn't always come dressed in roses. It comes wrapped in resilience. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-to-the-heart storytelling. Because here, with Told Stone, we remember what hearts are made of.